Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm your host, Melissa Melton, and it's Thursday, February 21st, 2013. And first up, NASA is actually reporting a massive sunspot is rapidly forming. A giant sunspot that's at least 6 times the diameter of Earth has formed on the sun in less than 48 hours. And we know that these kinds of things lead to potential solar storms. And our power framework in this country was not built to even see the 21st century. And now we have 30 million spent fuel rods just sitting around in spent fuel pools. And these storms are more worrisome than just knocking out cell phone coverage. If the power grid goes down, there's a lot more to worry about. So we definitely need to keep an eye on that. And in other news, the TSA is apologizing now for harassing yet another wheelchair-bound toddler, 3-year-old Lucy, who has spina bifida and was in a wheelchair, went with her parents to go to Disney World. And basically, screeners told her mother that it was illegal for them to film as they molested her child and pulled her wheelchair aside to swab it for bomb residue. And they even took away this little girl's stuffed doll, her stuffed lamb doll, I guess because it was a terrorist weapon, not sure. And basically my question is, how many more videos of this are we going to see? This little girl was crying in the video. She's weeping. She was saying, I don't want to go to Disney World anymore, and bawling. And I just want to know, how many more videos like this are we going to see of the TSA harassing little 3-year-olds when they come through there, taking off diapers of old ladies, taking out their colostomy bags, and how is this keeping any of us safer from terrorists? I mean, really, in the end of the day, all they're doing is scaring elderly people, scaring children, making people cry. They've never stopped a single terrorist, and this is going to continue until the American people stand up and put a stop to this. And in other news, switching gears, reaping the whirlwind, the Colorado model and gun control. Apparently on February 18th, the Democrat-controlled Colorado House of Representatives passed all 4 gun control bills that were set to go in that state, and they're now headed to the Senate. And basically, this is a shift in that region of their politics to the left. And as the New American reports, this shift's been going on since 2004, when 4 rich liberals started the Colorado model, which is a strategy designed to turn red states blue. And as Eric Erickson of RedState.com points out, this model is one of the left's most effective stratagems. And when combined with the tactics of Saul Alinsky and his disciples, this model is akin to a Soviet platoon armed with AK-47s mowing down a militia armed with slingshots. So people in Colorado, look at this. Look at what's going on here. You need to wake up to this agenda because they're trying to take away your rights. But apparently they're not going to do that here in Texas, at least we hope not, as Representative Steve Toth is now weighing a bill that would buck gun control. HB 1076, the Firearms Protection Act, would make it a misdemeanor to enforce federal gun control measures that are being pushed by the Obama administration. And if it passes, it would ban state, county, and municipal authorities, including district attorneys, from enforcing any future federal gun control laws. And it's a sad state of affairs when we have to pass laws now to keep the federal government, which is obviously tyrannical, from taking away our God-given rights. I mean, it's pathetic, actually. And moving on to something even more pathetic, Sierra Club protesters are now calling for a one-child policy here in the U.S. When they were protesting the Keystone Pipeline at the National Mall in D.C. last Sunday, several protesters expressed support for population control measures, including the implementation of a global one-child policy similar to China's brutal and draconian policy. And one of the protesters claimed that people who have excessive children are not showing the proper amount of, quote, earth patriotism. And she said she had her 2 kids, her kids had 2 kids, and not having excessive children is earth patriotism. So these people are either just okay with murder or just completely ignorant of what actually goes on in China with their one-child policy. I mean, this is a place where they send squads in, and if you have more kids than you're supposed to in whatever region you live in, they will extract you from your house and forcibly abort you at any level of your pregnancy and just throw your child in a bucket like it's trash. So these people are saying that's Earth patriotism. That's disgusting. And actually, what's even more disgusting about the Sierra Club, just a note on that, is not only are they the oldest environmental group in America, but two of their founders, one's an unapologetic racist who's openly written about how he feels that the Indians were ugly and altogether hideous. He says they have no right place in the landscape, even though they were obviously here before he was. And another co-founder, David Brower, actually says, quote, childbearing should be a punishable crime against society unless the parents hold a government license. All potential parents should be required to use contraceptive chemicals, and the government would issue an antidote to citizens chosen for childbearing. So these are the people that are advocating a one-child policy, and isn't that just so wonderful? And actually, speaking of something disgusting, this next story really got to me, and I think everybody needs to pay attention to it. Mother sues Planned Parenthood over forced botched abortion. This woman went to a Planned Parenthood to take a pill. I guess they have a pill to end her pregnancy. They told her she was too far along to be terminated through a pill, so she'd need a surgical abortion. And the employees there couldn't get her IV started for anesthesia. And she told the doctor at that time immediately to stop, that she took that as a sign she should not have this abortion. He did not stop. He turned on the vacuum machine anyways. And 7 minutes later, they gave her an apology and a prescription and sent her on her way. And apparently 2 days after that, she ended up in the hospital for pain and bleeding. And they found a piece of her baby still inside of her body. And it caused her to have an infection, and she had to have emergency surgery. And these kinds of stories happen a lot, and it's horrifying. Openly on record, Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, she was an open eugenicist. Read her writings. There's no other way to take it. She was speaking at KKK rallies, and even today we see many Planned Parenthoods disproportionately located in minority neighborhoods. I mean, that's where they are even today. And the American taxpayer spends $1.5 million a day to fund this, and to fund things so that you can see stories like this that come out that are just disgusting, and it's horrible, and it really needs to stop. It goes against everything that you should care about as a human. I mean, you devalue one human life, you devalue everyone. This is disgusting. Okay, and moving on finally tonight, prominent American scientists are now calling for an eco-dictatorship under UN rule, and this comes from Jurriaan Maessen of ExplosiveReports.com, of an upcoming scientific publication from the American Institute of Biological Sciences, where these guys say, some have argued that progress on these global environmental problems can be made only through a concerted effort to change personal and social norms, and they contend that we must, through education and persuasion, ensure that certain behaviors become ingrained as a matter of personal ethics. And they go on to say that some have argued regulations are inherently coercive and cannot or should not exceed implied levels of public permission. But an alternate viewpoint, their viewpoint, is that governments can and even should move beyond existent levels of public permission in order to shift norms, allowing public sentiment to later catch up to the regulation. What regulations? They're talking about carbon taxes. They're talking about openly using propaganda on people to change their behavior so that they'll want to pay carbon taxes and believe in this stuff, and fines to alter people's behavior if they don't want to get on board. And I'm actually going to talk more about that with Jurriaan Maessen in the upcoming interview after the break. But first, let's go to the quote of the day. God gave me my money. I believe the power to make money is a gift from God to be developed and used to the best of our ability for the good of mankind. Having been endowed with the gift I possess, I believe it is my duty to make money and still more money, and to use that money I make for the good of my fellow man according to the dictates of my conscience. John D. Rockefeller. And I did the voice because, wow, that quote, it really sounds like it belongs in a Hallmark card, doesn't it? I mean, it's so sweet and loving. He believes that it's the good of his fellow man according to his conscience. And on record, this is somebody who funded Nazi eugenicist research, and that research is branched off to the Rockefeller's Population Council, which continues today to go into third world countries and advocate population control. I'm sure God would be so proud of you, John Rockefeller, for all of your wonderful efforts with all of your disgusting money. And actually, I'm going to talk more about that with Jurriaan Maessen after this break.
ProPure is introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. This is the Pro One by ProPure. You wanted it, you got it. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium fluoride. You have a system that cuts out the sodium fluoride and up to 95% of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Advanced manufacturing technology combines silver-impregnated white ceramic with new Aquamedics advanced media for removal of fluoride and other heavy metals, all in one filter element. It cuts out the acid derivative of fluoride. It is the only one that does it, and out of the gates, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the only system that in one unit helps reduce or remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, ammonia, and chlorine, hydrofluorosilicic acid, the most common form of fluoride not covered by other fluoride filter brands, and sodium hexafluorosilicate. This is a revolution against the tyrants. They love putting the toxic acid base of fluoride into your water. They love the fact that it's an adjuvant supercharging the trace Prozac in the water and the hormones and the other chemicals. By cutting out fluoride, you cut out the turbocharger in all the poison being artificially introduced into your body. This is what I use. It's a win-win. You get a high-quality product at the lowest price. You support the InfoWar. Get your ProPure with the new Pro One filter today at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139.
InfoWars.com is proud to introduce the new InfoWars skateboards by Alien Workshop. Skaters have always been against the grain socially. Now wake up your friends politically. Just go to InfoWarsStore.com. We have divide and conquer our brainwashing. Then take your deck to your local skate shop, pick out your own trucks, your own wheels, and then hit the streets and wake some people up. Here is legendary skateboarder Jake Nunn.
This one has a lot more concave than I have on my board, and I like concave. It makes it easier to turn and feel the board. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's almost the same shape as mine. It's not really a sport, and it's not really art. It's just kind of freedom, you know. I've listened to Alex Jones for a long time, and I love what InfoWars does. I've always loved Alien Workshop too. I think it's kind of cool you guys got together. This one's pretty nice. Definitely one for the wall, one for the collection. Also good to skate.
Get these limited edition decks at InfoWarsStore.com.
This is Jake Nunn. Get these beautiful new skateboards at InfoWars.com. Alien Workshop collaboration. Good stuff.
We are back, and we're joined by Jurriaan Maessen, an investigative writer who oftentimes you'll see his reports up on Infowars.com, but also you'll see them on his website, ExplosiveReports.com. And we're going to be talking today a little bit about the eugenics movement and how it's not just a thing of the past, it's actually a thing of today. Thank you for joining us today, Jurriaan.
Thank you.
So let's talk for a second just about eugenics in general, because I think a lot of people are under the impression, I mean, this is the weeding out of the unfit, and I think a lot of people are under the impression that it went away with Hitler because he openly advocated the master race. He was openly advocating eugenics. It became very unpopular during and after World War II. And I think a lot of people think that when he went away, World War II ended, that eugenics just somehow kind of disappeared, but that's anything but the case.
Right, because the Rockefeller Foundation funded in the early days of Nazi eugenics, funded the Wilhelm Kaiser Institute, and the Rockefeller Foundation didn't go away with Hitler. It went on its straight course after World War II, and eugenics stayed with us for the decades after World War II up to today.
Up to today. What are some of the names that eugenics goes by in our modern eugenics movement and some of the key players in that, some of the key organizations?
Well, one of the names that pops up is family planning. Family planning is a very popular term, for example, with the Planned Parenthood Foundation and all that.
But that's supposed to be a good thing, right? Because that's women's rights, right?
Right, women get to choose how they their reproductive rights and all that, but it's actually a name under which a crypto-eugenic program is being continued, as it has started before World War II. It's still relevant, and environmentalism is another one. Very much focused on people to blame for all the woes the earth has to suffer under, and we are to blame. We are locusts, we are a plague, as David Attenborough described us, and we have to be destroyed because of that. So this is just pretexts under which a crypto-eugenic program is being pursued.
And we have a lot of different key groups that are in on that. We have the Rockefeller Foundation through their Population Council that's in on that, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID. We have a lot of United Nations organizations, UNFPA, and they're all in on this population control, but they call it family planning. But really,
right,
it's eugenics.
It is eugenics, and we could call it crypto-eugenics because it hides behind all kinds of pretexts, no-brainers like women's rights and all that. Of course, women's rights are important, but they're important within the community. Women have always been important. Men have always been important. I mean, it's just no-brainers like trendy logos under which an old agenda is being pursued. And of course, those no-brainers are used to get the masses on board with these
because nobody's going to argue with women's rights. No one's going to say we have to argue with, you know, no one's going to talk out against that and say that's bad. And women's rights, that sounds wonderful.
Right. So there's no stopping these people behind it. And the same goes for the environment. I mean, who's against the earth? Who's for pollution or who's for damaging the environment? It's all perfectly sensible. But also the fact that in the environmental movement, for example, has always harkened back to global warming. And global warming is a very dubious science, which is being pushed, not deforestation, for example, or, you know, plastics being thrown into the ocean. That's real environmental devastation happening right now. But no, it's global warming. So a contrived pretext, as Aaron Dykes described it, it's an absolute valued pretext for their absolute control model.
And I thought you and I had spoken yesterday about some other research that I'm doing, and I thought it was pretty interesting. You had mentioned how here in the developed world, they will sell this to us with these trendy, you know, names, and they make it sound all wonderful. But in the third world, they're just outright with it. They're just outright telling people this is what we're going to do. We're going to sterilize people. You know, they're just open with it. I thought that was a pretty interesting difference.
Yes, they call it at the UN. They call it case specific. So they model the propaganda after the country in which they activate this propaganda. So in the third world, where there's much more corruption, there's much more open brutality and all of that, they're much more open about the eugenic thought behind all those measures, like the example in India, for example, where women after sterilizations were just dumped in a field to, quote, recover from their operations. So it's very sickening. It is going on, and it is like a twofold attack. It's like biological on the one hand, forced sterilizations or semi-consent sterilizations, and on the other hand, it's propaganda. It's like using the media to convince people, and that especially is the case in the developed nations in the West, to propagate us, to propagandize us into accepting all kind of dehumanizing manners. And Agenda 21 comes into play, especially in the developed nations.
Yeah, and they talk about this and they say, like, again, like we said, it's women's rights, it's family planning. But as you just mentioned, in India, they had that story that came out just recently where over 100 women were sterilized in one day. They were given no proper medical care, and then they were just dumped open air into a field like garbage, like trash. You also wrote another story that came out recently about the one-child policy in China, where the enforcers came to a family. They were trying to get a fee from the parents under this one-child policy, and the family got, I guess it got heated, and they ended up running over and killing their 13-month-old baby boy. And these kind of stories happen all the time.
Right, and there's also the late-term abortions and all of that, where babies being born are just flung into a bucket. I mean, that's Paul Joseph Watson reported on that one. The brutal face of China's one-child policy, that article's called. It's very brutal, and it's all an outcome of not so much the Chinese government per se, but it is, for example, the Club of Rome, who directly inspired the one-child policy. On their models, the one-child policy has been developed. So it all harkens back to that old consensus, that global consensus on population, which the World Bank describes as such, and the outcomes, are brutal.
You mentioned the World Bank just now. They're definitely a part of this. In my research that I'm doing for a special report that's coming up, I actually came across a report where they funded a project in India, and they called it something like maternal health and child well-being, or something that sounds really good. And I'm reading through it, and on the surface, it's sounding really good. They're talking about they want to raise, lower mortality rates. They want to raise health rates for kids and all, and it sounds great. And then you get to the appendix, and there's all these creepy scientific research projects they're doing with contraceptive devices, where they're injecting polymers into male vas deferens tubes to keep sperm from going where it needs to go. And I mean, just all kinds of, why is a World Bank, first of all, doing scientific research on birth control? I mean, what is that?
Well, the World Bank in earlier reports, especially the one from 2010, I did an article about. The World Bank openly says that it has lending conditions. So based on population control measures, the countries they want to lend or withdraw lending from have a certain population control active. So that's very dark.
Oh, that's disgusting, actually. And here in America, we're funding a lot of these same things, too. We're funding Planned Parenthood, and under USAID, we're funding a lot of these family planning, which is really population control programs in other countries. And they say, again, like it's women's rights, but it's nobody's rights to be forcibly or coercibly sterilized and then dumped in a field like trash. Why do you think more people aren't outraged and just disgusted by this?
Well, we have the propaganda by UNESCO, for example, to thank for this, because a great part of the people is occupied with the pretext and is not looking behind it. That's why the alternative media has to, provide the research that's available, that's just out there, pretty open, to as large a mass of people possible, to eventually reach some kind of critical mass in which we can turn things around and look behind the pretext.
Well, on record, you'd mentioned earlier John Rockefeller, the Rockefeller Foundation, population control. On record, that guy was funding, like you said, Nazi research into eugenics. He was enamored with the idea of a master race. We have him funding all of these things. We've got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where their vaccines are openly. I think it was 48,000 children in India were paralyzed after botched polio vaccinations funded by them. And Bill Gates has actually gone on record to say that if we can get vaccinations just right, what was it? It can lower 15% of the population. I mean, these people are doing this, and they're doing it under the name of philanthropy, but they actually say they're trying to inform national policy. They're trying to change things. I mean, why is that okay? Just because they have money?
Well, it's part that, but money is, I think, just an instrument for these, elite foundations and the UN. Money is just an instrument to get the job done. I mean, there is a certain point where rich people don't care about the money anymore, and they have enough money already, and they think about, they have to quench their bloodthirst in a certain way, and they do this in unison. So you see all these this apparatus, the foundations on the one hand, the UN on the other hand, and you see governmental organizations like USAID working together in concert, synchronizing their actions at Bilderberg and at Bohemian Grove and all these kinds of meetings towards this one specific goal, and using engines, countries as engines, such as China, such as India. They call it emerging markets because they are getting more powerful. And this is all part of Agenda 21, to equalize the world, to deindustrialize the West at the benefit of the East. All this is planned, and it's part of one big agenda, and it's done by all kind of foundations in unison. That's very important.
Yeah, it's very disconcerting. And I know in some of your articles, and I've read a lot of them, but there are many, and I want to read them all someday. I've seen commenters who actually will go on there and write things like, well, this is good because India and China have too many people and we have to do something. But really, I mean, when you devalue one human life, you're devaluing us all. So, I mean, it's amazing that it's sad for the world, I think, that people can have that opinion.
Right, and it's also very stupid because what happens there will happen here if it is accepted as such. And today there came a report from Live News that Sierra Club protesters called for a global one-child policy, a global one-child policy.
Oh,
so
just
that's
like
for
Ted
all.
Turner.
Right.
Great.
Ted Turner called for it. You know, Jeffrey Sachs, the big UN guy, called for it, and they're just pretty open about it right now.
It's just amazing. Well, finally, I want to discuss your latest article that just came out a couple days ago. Prominent American scientists call for eco-dictatorship under UN rule. This is about an upcoming scientific publication, and you have a quote here. Governments can and even should move beyond existent levels of public permission in order to shift norms, allowing public sentiment to later catch up with the regulation. And this is in the spirit of growing Agenda 21, which population control definitely plays into. I mean, what is the gist of your latest report here?
Well, that latest report is a PDF file available ahead of print, which will be appearing next month in the Bioscience. That's the journal of the American Institute for Biological Sciences. And the thesis is called Social Norms and Global Environmental Challenges. The whole thing was put together by, a plethora of scientists, including 2 Nobel Prize winners, and not to forget Paul Ehrlich had a hand in that report. Right, Eco-Science, our guy. And what they are calling for is for government and scientific community to work together, again, in the US, in unison, to, on the one hand, propagate environmental values, and they openly call for deception or deceptive propaganda. The quote you just told about governments can and even should move beyond existent levels of public permission. What they are actually saying is we should just go ahead with it, whether the public wants it or not. It is our responsibility. It is our role to educate the people in regards to this. At the same time, they are calling for the government to install all kind of Agenda 21 measures, like fines, like more regulation, carbon taxes, and all of that, and to move those 2 things together in unison again forward under UN rule, so attached to UN international bodies.
Moving
so
towards
this
a
goes
global
against,
government.
right, and against the grain of the US Constitution.
Wow. Well, where do you see all of this heading? I mean, are more people waking up to this agenda?
Yes, the definite answer to that is yes, because you see a lot more people, a lot more traffic. The alternative media is way up, and the mainstream media is way down, although they still pretend that they're up there. You know, we're the mainstream media. Those days are gone, and a new media is arising, a media which doesn't always agree with one another, and that's good because they contradict each other, they disagree with each other, and there's room for that. It's flexible enough for that. The mainstream media is a monolith, and you see the monolith falling apart, breaking.
Good. Well, I hope it continues. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Jurriaan. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And what Jurriaan said is true. We are the alternative media. We are growing, and that is what's going to help win this war, because the mainstream media is not talking about this. You've got family planning. They make it sound like it's women's rights, but in other countries, women are being forcibly sterilized. Their children are being killed under this, and taxpayer money here is funding that kind of stuff. In mainstream media, they're not talking about it. We are. And actually, if you want to help support and get that message out, you can go to PrisonPlanet.tv. You can sign up for a subscription. One subscription equals 11 people. You'll get all of our special reports, nightly news, the daily radio show, and help us fund this operation to get this out there, because this really is going to affect all of us. A lot of people think that this is in other countries. It's something they don't have to think about. But this is going to come home to roost. It's going to come home to us. And so I urge everybody to do their research into this, because the eugenics movement is not a thing of the past. It is happening right now, and it's happening all over the world. And that's it for tonight's InfoWars Nightly News. We'll see you again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central.